Murali will wait for a couple of minutes.
Sure, no problem.
Because just after lunch, people are just joining.
No problem, Pathogen, I'll wait.
Yeah. ಎಷ್ಟಾಯ್ತು ಜನ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದು ಸಾರಿ Okay. Let's try it again. Shall we start?
Oh, Pathogen, I'm all ready.
Because people are joining slowly. There are about 30.
We can start whenever you want.
Okay. Maybe a couple of more minutes.
Sure. Yeah.
The program is like this, Murali. I will briefly welcome and introduce you to the audience. Then there is an address by the Vice Chancellor, which will be followed by your talk, followed by question and answers, if any, then a vote of thanks.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Yeah.
But Abhi, I think I'll need to be made the co-host to share my screen.
After the video share, they will do that for
Okay,
you.
fine.
Yeah. Okay, shall we start? Very good afternoon to you all. I welcome all of you, Dr. Murali Shastri, Professor, the speaker of this National Science Day lecture, and all the participants, my colleagues. A warm welcome to you all. Let me briefly introduce Dr. Murali Shastri, a very well-known nanotechnologist, and for the benefit of the participants, I just introduce him because the participants, it is better to know what Murali Shastri's credentials are before listening to him. Dr. Murali Shastri is a professor of material science and engineering and chemical engineering. He obtained his master's and PhD degrees in experimental condensed matter physics from the Institute of Technology, Madras. He moved to Second University of Rome and Synchrotron Trieste, where he specialized in surface spectroscopies applied to a range of materials, including metal nanoparticles. Then he returned to India and joined the National Chemical Laboratory, Pune, where he researched on Langmuir project and organic hybrid materials, colloid chemistry, novel methods for functionalizing nanoparticles, and biological methods for nanoparticle synthesis. In 2005, he moved to Tata Chemicals to set up their innovation center that delivered 3 new business in water purification, nano oxides, and nutrition. In 2011, he moved to DSM, India, where he helped establish the innovation team and develop a roadmap for new products in renewable energy and nutrition. From 2015 to 2020, he was the CEO of the IIT Bombay Monash Research Academy. Presently, he is a professor at the Material Science and Engineering, Chemical and Biomedical Engineering, Monash University, Australia. His expertise includes organic and hybrid thin films, Langmuir-Blodgett thin films, synthesis and surface modification of nanomaterials and their shape control, plasmonics, chemical reactivity of metal nanoparticles, nanobiomaterials and their applications, surface spectroscopies, low-cost water purification technologies and standards, end-to-end innovation, and awards and his professional memberships include a CSIR Young Scientist Award, Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award in Chemistry in 2003, and he is selected a Fellow of the Indian Academy of Sciences, and he has published over 400 papers in reputed international journals with an H index of 88 and I-10 index of 268. And I'm very happy to say that his citations exceed 44,000 and the highest citation for a paper being 2,850. And he has 3 papers with more than 2,000 citations and 9 papers with more than 1,000 citations and 21 papers with more than 500 citations. And I should stress that in line with the Professor Raman's legacy and all this work, most of it was done in the country, and he is a homegrown scientist. Only for the last 2 years, he has been in Australia, and that's what one can see, that even in Indian laboratories, one can produce such high quality research. And that is why I thought it fit to invite him to this year's National Science Day lecture, because Raman was a homegrown scientist and we are commemorating the discovery of Raman effect. And I'm very happy we have a person who is homegrown and eminent to deliver this lecture. I welcome Dr. Murali Shastri to deliver this lecture. And just before that, we have a message from our Vice Chancellor, who would have been happy to have presided over this lecture. And because of the syndicate meeting today, he is fully engaged from morning 10 till 6 in the evening. But he has obliged to give a video, recorded video, which will be played now, that the National Science Day message. And after that, we'll have the lecture by Dr. Murali Shastri. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Greetings from Bangalore University. On this day in 1928, Dr. C. Raman discovered a phenomenon of scattering of photons, which was later known as Raman effect after his name. After 2 years in 1930, he got Nobel Prize for this remarkable discovery, and this was the first Nobel Prize for India in the field of science. To mark the discovery of his famous phenomenon, National Science Day is celebrated in India on the day each year. In 1986, the National Council for Science and Technology Communication requested the Government of India to designate 28th February as National Science Day, which the then Government of India accepted and declared the day as National Science Day in 1986. The first National Science Day was celebrated on February 28, 1987. Raman effect is a phenomenon in spectroscopy discovered by the eminent physicist while working in the laboratory of the Indian Association for the Civilization of Science, Kolkata, when he was working as a patent officer. Before and after the office hours, he used to spend time in this laboratory to carry out research. It was a passion rather than his profession. Raman effect, change in the wavelength of light that occurs when a light beam is deflected by molecules. When a beam of light traverses a dust-free, transparent sample of a chemical compound, a small fraction of the light emerges in the directions other than that of the incident or incoming beam. Most of the scattered light is of unchanged wavelength. A small part, however, has wavelengths different from that of the incident light. Its presence is a result of the Raman effect. The basic objective of observation of National Science Day is to spread the message of the importance of science and its application among the people. National Science Day is celebrated as one of the main science festivals in India every year. Professor Murali Shastri, an eminent nanotechnologist from Monash University, Australia, known for his contributions to nanotechnology in India and abroad, is giving a lecture on safe and affordable drinking water for all, from idea to market. This talk illustrates how an idea
I request Dr. Murali Shastri to go ahead with this lecture. We are keen to listen to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patabi. First of all, I need to acknowledge the invitation from Bangalore University, Vice Chancellor and Registrar. I think I'm getting a little bit of background noise. Yeah. So I just wanted to thank. It'll be good if everyone can mute their mics. Yeah. So thank you very much once again, Patabi, for your very kind words of introduction. I'd like to also thank Mangalore University, the Vice Chancellor, the Registrar, and of course the Dean Faculty of Science, Professor Manjunatha Patabi, for the invitation to speak on this very important occasion, National Science Day 2022. I'd like to first of all acknowledge my dear friend, Professor Manjunatha Patabi, who's not only a respected colleague, but a very, very dear friend. And when he said, he would like me to speak, I jumped at the opportunity because when Patabi calls, I never refuse. So thank you very much, Patabi, once again. Let me try to share my screen now. I think I've been made a co-host, so let me share my screen. Please let me know whether you can see it. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So as the Vice Chancellor mentioned, and as Patabi also mentioned in his introduction, I'm going to be talking about something which is maybe slightly off the beaten track. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is my experiences in the corporate world, as part of the Tata Chemicals innovation team. I was heading the innovation team. And for me, it was a very fascinating journey, learning what it takes to take laboratory scale R&D, how do you take it to a market and make it a commercial success? And we had the very good fortune of being able to work on a problem that was extremely important to India. So the work happened around 2005 onwards. It culminated in a product which came out in 2009. The product is fairly well known. It's called Tata Swachh, Nano-enabled water purifier. But the whole process of learning what it takes to take an idea, proof of concept, scale up, do marketing and take it to the market was a training that happened to me that was extremely important. And I just wanted to share with you some of the experiences that I had. Of course, we are commemorating Professor C.V. Raman's discovery of the Raman effect. Many of you would have used Raman spectroscopy in the lab. It's the most important technique for characterizing carbon, basically carbon-based materials. And it's very important on this occasion for me to pay homage to such an illustrious scientist of India. So we all know what the important work that he's done. And certainly, I did most of my work in India, but there's absolutely no comparison. But what Patabi said actually is very, very important. I just do want to emphasize that it is possible to do pretty high quality work in India, high-end work. And I think we should, so long as we have the right kind of an approach to science, the right scientific temper, the right kind of ethical framework around which we do research, there's no reason to believe why we can't do better things in the future. So I think it's very, very important to remember Professor C.V. Raman's legacy in the current context. Let's take a step back. I just wanted to take just one slide to talk about where we are as a science nation. I would hesitate to call us a scientific superpower, but there are many things that we can be proud of. But I just wanted to talk to you about, present to you some data about where we are going on in science. So if you look at science spending, are you able to see my cursor? Yeah?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So if you look at the science spending of India versus the other countries who are scientific superpowers, if you take the United States, China, European Union, the expenditure for science and technology in India is quite low, and it's understandably slow. And we still have many other problems to deal with, and there's not a whole lot of money available for science and technology. But that said, there's a clear correlation between how much a country invests in science and technology and the innovation output. Now, the reason why we're interested in looking at the innovation processes as a measure of success is because innovation leads to commercial products, and then that leads to revenue generation, and that leads to greater GDP growth. So if you look at the slide on the right, we don't do very well when it comes to innovation. Look at China. China is now among the top 15 in the world in 2020. And there's a clear correlation to how China became such a superpower in innovation and the amount of investment they have made in science and technology, in the research, in the laboratories, in the corporate sector. So there's clearly something that we need to look into as a matter of science policy going forward. The topic of this particular lecture is not to talk about science policy, but I just wanted to leave you with this particular thought, saying that we really need to do a lot more in terms of science and technology in the country. So let me talk to you about the topic of today. For me, it was a problem about coming up with a solution to provide safe, affordable drinking water to the citizens of India. Now, at that point of time, when we got into this particular problem, we really did not know what safe and affordable actually meant. I mean, we were pretty much in the lab, working at the bench, so we really didn't have an idea. But we started looking at the data, and I just wanted to present to you some statistics, some data that we are confronted with even today. We're in the 21st century, 2022. In this day and age, we still have this very unfortunate situation where if you look at the global population, 1 billion people still lack access to safe drinking water. And this is actually quite a shame. The reason being that there are technologies available which are affordable, which can provide safe, very low-cost drinking water. But unfortunately, taking this technology to the market, to the masses, has proven to be a major stumbling block. So these are the kinds of pictures that we will see in India. We will see in the interior parts of the country where you don't have piped water, where you don't have community-level treatment systems. We have young children, usually female children, traveling long distances to fetch water. A 4-year-old shouldn't need a bucket list. So if you look at 1 in 5 children currently, these are the stats. 1 in 5 children under the age of 5 dies each day from a waterborne disease. Now, this is a very unfortunate number. I mean, this is too high a percentage just because of consumption of unsafe drinking water. And this is completely preventable. There are technologies. There just needs to be the right kind of mechanism to take the technology, put it in the hands of the people who need it the most, and these deaths can be prevented. Again, pictures that you would see, these are pictures taken from Africa, but you can easily replace this with pictures from India, and the story is exactly the same. People fetch impure water from lakes, from ponds, and then they drink it without any kind of a purification, or they might use very, very rudimentary purification techniques. And again, you have the mother and child going long distances to fetch water. I like to point out that in all of these pictures, when we were getting into this problem, we looked at this problem in a very holistic sense. So this kind of a picture tells many, many stories, right? One is, of course, young children going long distances to fetch water, but also the fact that often it is the female child that goes with the mother. It's never the male child. So there's a social context to it also. We have to think about those aspects. As scientists, we tend to be locked in the lab. We're working on technologies, cool technologies. We're looking at nanotechnology. But in the bigger world outside, these are the kinds of issues that we have to also deal with. So when we come up with a technology, can we make it appropriate to the female gender? Can we make it appropriate to the female child? Because this situation is not going to change very quickly. This is not going to be replaced with a young boy traveling with the mother to get water anytime soon. So we're going to have to deal with coming up with technologies that they can deal with, right? So these are things that we normally don't think about when we're coming up with a product. So it was a very important eye-opener for me personally when we got into this journey. So just to summarize the kinds of unfortunate numbers that we have to deal with today, diarrhea is the leading cause of death among children under the age of 5 in the world. And that's primarily due to drinking impure, unsafe water. 780 million people don't have access to clean water. I mean, this is very unfortunate. A child dies from diarrhea every 21 seconds. And so on and so forth. I mean, you can read the numbers yourself. The bottom line is we have a serious problem. We can be proud of many, many things, but certainly we cannot be proud of the fact that we are unable to, as a nation, or many nations around us, are unable to take perfectly available technologies and put it in the hands of the people who need it the most. So this is how the global map looks like. It's a little old, but still most of the numbers are still relevant. If you look at the under 5 mortality rate by country, we don't fare very well. India does not fare well at all. We have a very high mortality rate, and this can be directly linked to the non-availability of safe drinking water. So these children are consuming poor quality water. And remember, under the age, why is the age of 5 so important for us to look at? until the age of 5, the immune system for children is still getting developed. Whereas we as adults, we might be able to drink the same water and survive quite easily. Young children under the age of 5 still don't have a developed immune system. And when they're exposed to this kind of drinking water, then they succumb. It's a disease burden, and then they usually it leads to fatality. So this is a situation that we're in. We should not be proud of this situation. We are going to have other problems to contend with, right? It's not just the current scenario of unsafe drinking water. We're also going to be heavily stressed. If you look at the water stress map of the world, which is going to get worse as climate change kicks in, and the true impact of climate change will be felt in the years to come, India is going to be severely impacted by the climate change, the rainfall patterns. So we are going to be severely water stressed. So the situation is not going to get any better in terms of availability of water. So we will have to figure out a way of not only making safe drinking water available, but also use the existing water resources in a more efficient manner. We have other problems to deal with, right? So we have the issue, we have open defecation, which is still practiced in many parts of the country, where, because of lack of access to toilets, villagers defecate in the open, and that contaminates groundwater, and that leads to disease. So the Prime Minister has dealt with this. We've had the Swachh Bharat mission. A lot of nice initiatives have been implemented, which are directly addressing this particular issue, but this still continues to be a problem. So the point I'm trying to make is, when we look at a problem such as providing safe drinking water, it's not just about the device alone that we're working on. We also need to look at the social issues at play. One is, of course, open defecation. Not that we as scientists can solve it, but we at least need to be aware of these kinds of problems, right? And see whether we can, at some stage, provide a meaningful solution. So I'm going to introduce a concept which perhaps many of you already know. It's called the DALYS concept, DALYS. And this is called if I expand DALYS, it's the disability adjusted life years. So what happens is, one of the things that we can really be proud of in India is the fact that our life expectancy for both females and males has improved dramatically since we became independent. At the time of independence, I think it was the life expectancy for a male was around 35 years. For females, it was around 38, 39 years. Now it's close to 70 years and 75 years. So we've done really, really well. But the question we need to ask is, we are living longer, and that's a good thing. But the additional years that we are living, are we living that in a healthy way? Are we able to be productive the longer that we live? The answer is no. And the reason is manifold. We have many, many reasons why the additional years that we are living are not productive. One is, of course, it can be due to pollution. We all know that. We are really having a major problem with respect to pollution in India today. In Delhi, there have been some calculations which show that if you lived your entire life in Delhi, your life expectancy goes down by about 7 years. In Bombay, it's a little bit better, but it's about 5 years. And the numbers across the country are quite bad. So on the one hand, we are living longer, but we are not living longer in a healthy manner. And this can be actually quantified. You can quantify this in terms of how many years you spend with disability. And this is YLD, what we call it, years lived with disability. And then the early death, added together, you get something called a DALY, a disability adjusted life year. The reason I mention this is perfectly applicable also to unsafe drinking water. Many of us would have encountered this, right? We would have had diarrhea. We've had to, we've consumed impure water. We've had to take off from work, and that affects the productivity of the nation. If many people take off, then affects the productivity of the nation. There is a way of quantifying this, and this is one area of my current research, is to use the DALYS concept to quantify water purification. So if you buy a water purifier in the market, how safe is it? Does it really give you high quality water? And how do you differentiate between one purifier and the other? Can you give a star rating like you have for electrical consumption? You have a star rating which tells you which is more efficient, 5 stars meaning it's the most efficient. Can we also give a similar rating for water purifiers? But that has to be based on a quantitative measure. And that quantitative measure can be arrived at using DALYS. So this is something that we're working on. I just wanted to mention that briefly. Now, we have this situation, right? So I talked about young children not having the right immune system to be able to deal with impure water. that actually is true for many people at the base of pyramid. So if you look at this pyramid, the global population in this pyramid here, in terms of how much money they earn, then it's this kind of a pyramid that you have. So people at the top of the top of the heap, top of the pyramid, they earn really the very, very wealthy class of people. For them, they can buy any kind of technology, right? For them, if they have the most unsafe water, they will be able to buy a water purification device to render the impure water pure. But you come down the chain and you come to the base of pyramid. People who earn, for example, $2 to $10 a day, or even less than $2 a day, this makes about 4 to 5 billion people of the 7 billion people on this planet. These people cannot afford to buy a high-end reverse osmosis system from the market. But these are the people, because remember, they have very low incomes, and therefore the kind of nutrition that they get is also not very good. It's not just the fact that they don't have safe drinking water, they don't also have access to good quality nutrition, and therefore, because of that, their immune systems are much less robust than you and I. For these people, getting affordable technologies which will provide safe drinking water is absolutely a must. But the problem is that's exactly what doesn't happen. The people who need it the most are excluded from this simply because they're not able to buy the water purifier at a significant cost. So this is something that we were looking at when we looked at this whole problem of Tata Swachh. We needed to make a device that would provide safe drinking water, not just to the top income group of the country, but to people all the way down the line, predominantly the base of the pyramid, as we call it. So you have to look at a completely new paradigm. If you go and talk to business people, and because I was at the business end of things, when we talk about these kinds of problems and say, come up with a really high quality water purification device, which will be very cost effective, they usually laugh because they say in the minds of business people, this is not possible. You really need to have high-end technology to remove all the impurities in water. It could be disease-causing microorganisms like pathogens. It could be arsenic. It could be heavy metals, whatever. In the mind of the business people, it is that these are going to cost a lot of money. So the whole paradigm has to change. The way in which we think about products, the way in which we conceive the whole business plan or the business approach has to change. And there are new paradigms that we can look at. There's a lot of new, very exciting research that's happening in the business world around how you might actually do this, how you might actually create a culture for low-cost innovation. And I just wanted to talk about some of these examples here. Many different methodologies that are being used. I'm not going to bore you with the details. I'm just going to give you an example. One example, and this is an example where I've had the good fortune of working with this gentleman. I don't know, many of you might have heard of Mitticool. Mitticool is a product that was developed by Mansukh Prajapati. He's a person who comes from a family of potters, kumhars. And many generations, they make all kinds of clay utensils. They make clay pots, they make, matkas and so on. So he came up with this kind of a device. He came up with a refrigerator made entirely of clay, right? Now, we all know how an earthenware, the clay pot works in cooling water, right? You put water inside. Because the clay is porous, the water will evaporate, and because of evaporative cooling, the water gets cooled. He used exactly the same concept. So he created this kind of a device, made completely of clay, and at the top of this particular device is a small reservoir in which you can fill water. And because it's clay, it's porous, the water percolates throughout the clay in the body of this particular device, and it evaporates, and it leads to a significant reduction in temperature on the inside. So he basically put a glass window here, which you can open and close, and inside the glass window he put a couple of shelves, and he could sustain a 7 degrees Celsius temperature drop, depending on the relative humidity of the environment, the ambient, and so on. You could get a 7-degree temperature drop from the ambient to the inside. And he was very successful. It was picked up by the National Innovation Foundation and became a big success. So he approached us. I was at Tata Chemicals at the time, and he wanted to work with us to understand a little bit more about clay. So one of the things that I learned was how much more he knew about the material clay than I would ever know, because of this traditional knowledge and the fact that he knew how to work it. He knew all the empirical properties of this material. But it became very clear to me that I had a lot to learn from him and not the other way around. But in any case, what we did was we came up with a process for incorporating nano silver into the clay in this device. So in addition to the fact that you have a temperature drop, we also made the surface of this particular, let's call it a refrigerator, cool. We made it antimicrobial. So we gave him the technology, and it was quite a rewarding experience. Now, why is this so important? When you look at, so this is the paradigm I was talking about. When you talk about the business world, you have to reframe the whole question. What do we want in a refrigerator, right? Well, people like us who live in urban India who are fairly well-to-do, we buy a refrigerator for many things. One is to keep fruits and vegetables fresh for longer periods of time, so you reduce spoilage of fresh fruits and vegetables. We might also use it to make ice or to chill a glass of wine or whatever. But at the end of the day, what the refrigerator needs to do is to increase the shelf life of perishables. So if you can just reduce the temperature from the ambient in the manner that Mansukh Prajapati did, that's basically a refrigerator. So if you take fruits and vegetables and put it inside this chamber, what would normally rot in, say, 5 days would rot in 7 days, right? Because you've reduced the microbial degradation process because you've lowered the temperature. So if you just redefine what a refrigerator ought to do in terms of the properties, then you get a completely new technology, right? No electricity. This doesn't use any electricity, just water, and it does the job. And for people in rural India who don't have access to power, this is a great alternative. This is something that they can actually use to increase the shelf life of fruits and vegetables. So these are really, really interesting ways of looking at problems with a completely different lens. So where did the story begin for me personally? So I just moved to Tata Chemicals in 2005, as Patabi had mentioned. And we were just putting together a team of people. I was recruiting people, material scientists, nanotechnologists. We also got a lot of biotechnologists, bioengineers into the team. And we were starting to look around for problems. We're creating a roadmap for the Innovation Center. And while we were doing that, there was this very interesting interview that Mr. Ratan Tata had done. So he was interviewed, I think it was around the time of the launch of Tata Nano. And he was interviewed and he was asked by somebody, what would you like to see come from the house of Tatas in the next few years? So he mentioned almost off the cuff, he said, I would like a group of companies to come up with a water filter. And at that time, TRDDC was working on it. So he just kind of gave this as a suggestion saying, look, it'll be nice if Tata companies can come together and come up with a safe, affordable drinking water solution. Now, the way it works in the Tatas is it's never mandated. It's just a suggestion, and if you're happy with the idea, if you're happy with this, you take it and run. So this was how I was kind of co-opted into this particular project. So the project came to us. This was, I think, in about 2006. We had just put together the team. The lab was ready. I had a bunch of people working with me, and the vice chairman of Tata Chemicals, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, he came to the Pune lab and he said, Murali, you're a nanotechnologist. Can you look at this problem? Mr. Tata thinks there's an opportunity for us here and we should do something for the community. Why don't you look at some options? And he pointed me in the direction of Sujal. I don't know whether many of you have heard of this, but Sujal was a water filtration device. I wouldn't call it a purifier. It was a water filtration device that was developed by Tata TCS in their lab in Pune, which is called the TRDDC. They had come up with a product which is called Sujal. So he said, why don't you go and take a look at that product and see whether you can do something about that? Can you make it a better product that can sell in the market? So I went and took a look at it, and Sujal was not unknown to me. Even when I was at NCL, I knew the people in TRDDC. I'd taken a look at Sujal, but I went back and took a look at it, and it didn't strike me as being a possible solution. So I sat on this idea for about 3 months. And after 3 months, I got a call from Mr. Gopalakrishnan, and he asked me, Murali, what have you done about this? This seems to be interesting. And then I knew he was serious. And then I said, okay, maybe he's seeing something that I can't see. I mean, he's an extremely experienced person. He was he's a very, very senior person in the Tata Sons. So he can see things that obviously I couldn't see at that stage, and I took it very seriously. So what do we do as scientists? So I took a look at Sujal. What Sujal actually is it's basically a water filter, which is made up of rice husk ash. And I'll come to rice husk ash in a little while. So they made that, and they had deployed Sujal during the earthquakes that struck India, the Bhuj earthquakes, and they also deployed it during the tsunami in the coastal regions, right? So when you have those kinds of catastrophic events, you really don't worry about getting the highest quality water. You need to have something that will work quick and will be cheap enough for people to use, that they can get reasonably safe drinking water very, very quickly. So Sujal was at that time viewed as a disaster relief water filter. Nothing more than that. So we really had to work on it to make it a consumer product. So I looked at Sujal. So what do we do? So we looked at all kinds of techniques. As scientists, normally what we do is when we have a problem, we go and do a literature survey, right? We look at what's around us, what kind of technologies and processes exist, and then we look at the pros and cons and we identify gaps. So like good scientists, that's what we did in my team. So we looked at sand bed filters, and then we said, no, the capital costs are too high. The maintenance costs are also very high, and they don't address all water quality issues. For example, sand bed filters will not remove pathogens in water, right? Disease-causing pathogens. We looked at chemical treatment. That's a health hazard. It's an environmental hazard. And talking about chemical treatment always carries a negative connotation. We looked at reverse osmosis, high price electricity requirement. We wanted to come up with something that would not require electricity. High maintenance and replacement of components, UV purification, again, high cost, blah, blah, blah. So we went down the list and we pretty much drew a blank. None of these techniques came to our rescue. We clearly could not use any of these techniques. So everything was a big no. So we started looking at Sujal a lot more seriously. Now let's look at the problem that Sujal could not solve. Sujal could filter a lot of things, right? It could take out odors, it could take out smells from water, it could filter suspended impurities, right? So it could clarify water. But what it could not do is it could not kill the microorganisms like bacteria, cysts, and also viruses. It could not kill that. So water which will flow through Sujal would not, all the pathogens will flow right through, and then that's definitely going to be a problem. So if you look at the kinds of bacteria and viruses that we deal with normally in water in India, so you have things like cholera, you have toxins, cyanobacterial toxins, hepatitis, leptospirosis, typhoid fever. These are all the pathogens. These are all the diseases caused by pathogens in water from bacteria. Other kinds of organisms, for example, you can have ascariasis, you can have dengue, malaria, scabies, ringworm. All of that is passed through water. You can also have other kinds of inorganic impurities which cause diseases. For example, you could have anemia. You could have arsenicosis, which is such a huge problem in India, especially in the Indo-Gangetic plains, in West Bengal, in many parts of the North India now. Arsenicosis is becoming a significant issue as we take more and more water from the water table. Arsenic contamination is becoming a huge issue. Fluorosis, very close to Karnataka. In Andhra Pradesh, fluoride contamination is a very, very huge problem where it causes deformation of bones. People become completely disfigured. This is a very huge problem. Lead poisoning and so on and so forth. So anything that we had to do to upgrade Sujal would have to deal with all of these, most of these, if not all of these. So we really had a big challenge on our hands. So this is what we started with. Now let me break down Sujal and tell you exactly what's inside Sujal. Sujal consists of rice husk ash. This is what it looks like. This is just a petri dish in which we put a little bit of rice husk ash. Now let me tell you about how rice husk ash is produced commercially. So all of us eat rice, but how many of you have actually gone to a rice mill and seen how the whole the polishing process actually happens? So you have the grain of rice which comes into the mill. And the very first stage, what happens is they remove the husk, they polish it, they remove the husk, which is the outermost coating of rice. Then you have what is called then you have a brown rice, which is the white rice on which you have the rice bran, the thin coating of bran on the surface. So it's polished further, you remove the bran, and you get polished white rice, which we all consume. It's a sad fact that the really nutritious rice we don't really eat. We take away the bran and we eat the polished rice, where the really nutritious part is the brown rice. As you know, many people are now moving towards brown rice. The bran around the rice grain contains a lot of protein, and that's why there's so much of interest in consuming brown rice. Regardless, so what happens is when the husk is removed, what rice mills they do is they burn the husk. They generate heat and they generate power, right? Basically, it's like running a steam turbine. You can generate power, and they use the power for running the plant, right? For running all the machinery in the plant. It's called cogeneration. It's also done in sugar mills. When you have sugar, you extract the sugarcane juice, and the bagasse is then burnt to generate power, right? And steam and so on and so forth. It's called cogeneration. Exactly the same thing happens with rice husk ash. But the rice plant is very, very different from the sugarcane plant. And the reason is that if you look at the rice plant, it accumulates a lot of silica from the soil. So when you consume rice, you're actually consuming a lot of silica. and the silica is actually beneficial for the human system. But the bran also, the husk also contains a lot of ash. So what happens is it contains a lot of silica. So when you burn it, you burn away the carbonaceous component, but you're left behind with the inorganic component, which is the silica. So this is what it looks like. After you do the burning of the rice husk, you get this ash. Now this ash, we put it under the microscope, and this is what does the filtration. So if you look at Sujal, this is what they use in the filter. It just filters out a lot of impurities. If you put it under the microscope, this is what it looks like. This is a scanning electron microscope, but if you put it under TM, you would see even more detail. And these pores that you see are mesoporous. These are nanoporous structures. So we've actually done the analysis of this. But the thing is, because the combustion is always incomplete, what you have is an intimate mixture of silica, that's the inorganic component that does not combust, and you also have a little bit of activated carbon. So rice husk ash is a mixture of activated carbon, or activated charcoal if you want to call it, activated carbon with a little bit of silica. It's about 93% silica, and then the remaining 7% is activated carbon. Silica has very, very interesting chemistry. So when we looked at this problem, we said, okay, let's look at the chemistry of silica. Let's look at the microstructure of rice husk ash and see what we can do in terms of developing chemistry to make it a consumer product. Now, silica is a very interesting material because you can do all kinds of modifications to the surface. You can covalently function as, it has, okay, silica has, it's SiO2, but the surface tends to have what we call silanol groups. So you have SiOH groups. So the surface ends with a series of OH groups. Now the OH groups can be ionized. So you can replace the proton, or you can completely eliminate the proton to make the surface negatively charged, or you can replace the proton with a metal cation like silver, Ag+. So you replace the proton H plus with Ag+, and you could put silver ions into the structure. And that gave us a way for making these nanomaterials. So without getting into the details of the chemistry, we were trying to put silver nanoparticles into these pores, the holes that you see here. And the way we were doing it was, it's like a ship in a bottle. Many of you might have seen in a bottle, models where you would have a ship inside. How did the ship get inside the bottle? So what we were trying to do is to use the surface silanol groups, replace the proton with silver, and reduce the silver in situ. So you exchange the protons with silver ions, and then you reduce the silver ions within this matrix, and you can actually put silver nanoparticles into these holes. And silver is known to be a very, very potent antimicrobial agent. So that was the chemistry that we did. Seems very, very simple, but we had to figure out exactly the right protocol to be used to put the right amount of silver so that it would not come out. So at the end of the day, remember, this is going to go into the water purifier. So the water is going to flow through. And when the water flows through, you want to be sure that the nanoparticles of silver do not come out. So you have to entrap them inside. So we used all kinds of capping agents, encapsulating agents to keep it in place. We made a very big mistake, and this is something I talk about when I talk to business people. We made a very big mistake in not figuring out all the regulatory hurdles that will come. So we use the capping agent that Patabi and I would normally use in a lab. It works. It'll give you a nice capping and stabilization of the particles. But unfortunately, remember, this is going to be used for drinking water and has to be food grade. So whatever capping agent that you use also has to be food grade. So what we had used, unfortunately, the legal people told us it cannot be used. You'll have to go back and figure out something else. And we lost 1 year in the process. We had to go and look at a biocompatible capping agent that would become food grade, and then we got the certification to move ahead. So a lot of very, very interesting things that as scientists in the lab, we don't worry about. For us, a proof of concept with whatever we have, it could be the high purity chemicals from Aldrich or Sigma, and then we use it. When you get to the commercial scale, you have to worry about costs. So these things you can't use Sigma Aldrich chemicals, right? You'll have to figure out another way for getting silver into the system. So these are the things that I had to contend with in reducing the cost. So this is where silver nanotechnology came into this whole game. And I had worked on nano silver before I had moved to Tata Chemicals. As an academic, I had worked on in NCL. I'd been working on it, and we'd done a lot of work to show the antimicrobial behavior of nano silver. So it was fairly straightforward for me to say, look, this is something that we can look at to incorporate into Sujal to make Tata Swatch. And silver is a fantastic antimicrobial agent, right? And we know historically in India, traditionally we've been using silver utensils, silver cups, silver tumblers, silver plates. We use it traditionally for many, many generations. We also use nano silver in our basmas, Ayurvedic formulation. So we know all about that. So it can kill a large number of disease-causing microorganisms. It's known to kill something like 600 species of bacteria and viruses. But the good news is, because even though it's been used for many, many centuries, there is still not much documented evidence of silver resistance in bacteria. The moment you have silver resistance, then you have a problem, right? If you talk about antibiotics, we have this whole issue of antibiotic tolerance. Microorganisms over a period of time develop a resistance mechanism and they become tolerant, then you have to use different kinds of antibiotics. So we were very conscious of the fact that we needed to keep tracking whether microorganisms will come up that will be resistant to silver. So far, we haven't found anything. So we figured out a way of limiting the particle size and putting it into the mesoporous structure. It seems very, very simple, right? It's a very simple insertion chemistry, ion exchange chemistry, etc. But it took us 3 years to get the recipe right. So as scientists, what do? We will do this lab. Let's say that you have a PhD student working on this. You'll ask the student to do the ion exchange, do the characterization. You might do 3 or 4 experiments, maybe 5 experiments to see the reproducibility, and then you might file a patent and publish a paper. But remember, this is going to go into a device that millions and millions of people are going to use. So the recipe that you come up with has to be correct to the nth decimal place. It has to meet the specs to the nth decimal place. So the rigor with which the experimentation is done, the rigor with which you collect the data and see how the prototype filters are performing takes a lot of time. So while we worked out the chemistry fairly quickly, maybe in a year and a half, it took us a year and a half more, or even 2 years, I think, to be able to make all these devices and test them for a long period of time to ensure that we got the distribution of the performance, and we could say with certainty that this meets Six Sigma requirements before going to the market. So these are the things that, again, for me, when I went to the corporate world, I learned that the chemistry might be simple. The stuff that we use here would not lead to a publication in a leading nanotechnology journal. It's very, very simple chemistry, but the last mile that we had to go through to be able to make a product is something that we never experience in the academic world. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes. Why nano? I mean, we wanted to put silver inside. The reason why nano is very important is, all of you probably know it. I'm probably talking to the audience that's already, I'm preaching to the already preached audience. What we're basically doing is, again, let me go to this slide. You're trying to create a very, very high surface area. So if I were to take a small amount of silver, say about a gram of silver, and if I were to make nanoparticles about 5 nanometers in size, then pretty much if you calculate the total surface area of all the silver in that 1 gram of nano silver, the surface area can span close to a football field. And that's the analogy that people normally give. So with a very small amount of silver, you have very high surface area, and that's exactly what you want. You want to have very high surface area so that the contact, when the bacteria and viruses make contact with the silver, which is impregnated within the rhesus cache, the high surface area ensures that they're killed, that they're basically immobilized. So this is what we had to come up with. Now the story does not end there, right? So it's not just about making rhesus cache with nano silver and putting it into a cartridge and then that will sell. At the end of the day, the customer looks at all kinds of other things, right? There was a big engineering issue that we had to deal with. So you have the cartridge in which you have the nano silver and the water flows through. The water has to spend enough time in the cartridge for all the bacteria to be killed, right? So how do you ensure that the residence, what we call the residence time of the water, is maximized? So we had to come up with something called a reverse flow, Tata Swatch reverse flow techniques, and this is all trademarked in the corporate world. Whatever terminology you come up with, you try to trademark it, right? So if you look at the TSRF technology, what we did, and I'm going to illustrate this. Now, the point, again, another point I'm trying to make is these are things that we won't normally deal with as academics in a university environment or elsewhere, right? You'd make a device, it works, and then that's it. You file a patent, publish a paper, and you go on to the next problem. But when you actually want to make a product that will sell, you have to worry about these things. So my team got pulled into this. So we were very happy making the material that will go into the cartridge, but then we had to also look at the engineering aspects, how it will look, how do you maximize the contact time. So look at what happens in this cartridge. So you have the impure water which goes through. So this is all rhesus cache here. It's completely filled with rhesus cache in which we put in nano silver. So impure water goes in like this. And then, I'm sorry, the water flows in like this. You can see the black arrow. The water flows in like this. It comes out down like this. There is a nice device here which I'm going to talk to you about in a little while. So the water flows through this particular device, and against gravity, under hydrostatic pressure, the water flows through the ricer's cache, gets collected in the center, and comes out. So it's purified. Pure water comes through the center. The dirty water flows on the outside, and the hydrostatic pressure is pumped into the ricer's cache, and it collects like this. So this kind of a very tortuous path ensures that the water makes a lot of the time that it spends inside the cartridge is significant enough for the nanosilver to act and kill the microorganisms. Now let me come to this particular device here. Remember, this is a cartridge that is going to be sold to a customer, and this cartridge works for a certain lifetime. There's a certain lifetime for the cartridge. And we had come up with a methodology that would purify roughly about 6,000 liters of water. So the amount of silver that we put in was good enough to purify about 6,000 liters of water. Now, as customers, as consumers, you and I, what do we do? Okay, the seller tells you can use it only for 6,000 liters of water. You and I will be tempted to say, okay, it doesn't matter. Let me use it for another 1,000, 2,000 liters of water. How does it matter? But remember, we're dealing with water. People are going to drink it every day, and not just people like you and me, adults, but you're going to have young children, elderly people, people who have got immune compromised systems. They're going to be drinking this water. You cannot compromise on their safety, and therefore we had to come up with a mechanism where at the end of 6,000 liters of water, the water purifier had to just close shut. It will not allow any more water to pass through. Because remember, you're selling a product, you make certain safety claims. You cannot compromise on your brand. The Tata brand is a very important brand, right? In the minds of most Indians, you don't want to sacrifice the brand name. So what we did is we came up with an end-of-life device. So this is a very simple thing, and this was really fun to do. It's so absurdly simple. This resulted in something like 3 or 4 patents right here. So this is an inorganic salt, which is very sparingly soluble in water. Very sparingly soluble in water. Solubility is extremely low. So we pelletized this salt. It's patented. You can find out what the salt is. We pelleted it, and we determined the length of this pellet so that as the water would flow, 6,000 liters of water would flow, the pellet, of course, the salt would keep dissolving in water, and the pellet would keep getting smaller and smaller. So you have a spring on top, which keeps pushing the pellet down, all the way down, and you have a plunger at the end of the spring. So once the 6,000 liters of water has flown through and the inorganic salt is completely dissolved, it just closes shut. It won't allow any water to flow through. Very, very simple concept, and it was really, really nice to actually come up with these kinds of concepts. Now, would I have done this? Have I stayed in the academic world? The answer is no. Would have been doing some stuff in the lab scale, but this was a phenomenal learning experience for me, and this resulted in a large number of patents. On another day, if we have time, I'll talk to you about the big legal battle that we had with another large company that was also selling a product. So when we launched Tata Swatch, this is what the water purifier looks like. Really nice design. So we worked with a designer company in Pune. They came up with this design, so it was all clear. So when a customer uses this, they like to see visually that the water is very, very clean, right? So the water that actually gets purified, you can actually see it around in this container here, and then the water comes through. So it has a visual appeal to it. That was very aesthetically pleasing. And this particular water purifier could treat all kinds of organic pathogens, bacteria, typhoid, viruses, and so on and so forth. But it could also remove turbidity, odor removal, and taste enhancement. And one of the fun experiments that I used to do when I used to demonstrate this purifier to schools is, if you just take a bottle of Coca-Cola and pour it through the Tata Swatch, it'll come out clean. It'll come out completely colorless, because all the dyes and the colorants that are used get taken away by the activated charcoal, the carbon in it. So it's just a nice, cute experiment to do. But this end-of-life device that I talked about, you can see the spring, and you can see the plunger here, and you can see the salt here. This is exactly what it looks like. The product was launched in 2009. Mr. Ratan Tata himself came to launch the product. It became a big success, and so we got the market share for Tata Swatch went up, and obviously your market share going up comes at the cost of some other company. The other company that was threatened by us took us to court. They filed an injunction in court. They stopped us from selling Tata Swatch because they said our patent for the end of life infringed their patent. So I had to go and along with the patent attorneys, we put together a case. We went and fought in court and we won that case. So this is another thing that typically we don't experience in the academic world. So you really get into the real world and you have to deal with these kinds of situations. But it was really, really interesting putting together our argument, contesting the claim made by the other company. I won't name that company. So what did we have to do with? What did we have to deal with? So when we came up with this whole low-cost, affordable drinking water solution, we were told from day one, and not that we had any doubts, but we were told from day one that there was going to be no compromise on quality. So we looked at the US EPA guidelines. This is the global gold standard that everybody uses for water purification. And if you talk about pathogens, bioorganic pathogens, then this is what the US EPA stipulates. You have to remove what we call 6 log. There has to be a 6 log reduction in bacteria, which means that 99.9999949 of the decimal place, that much percentage of bacteria have to be removed in the water purifier. If you take a virus, it has to be 4 log, so it's 99.99. That has to be removed. And if you take cis, it has to be 3 log, 99.99. So it's called the 643 rule. And therefore, the water purifier that we came up would have to meet these requirements. So we had to test this water purifier. After doing all the internal testing, calibration, Six Sigma, etc., we got this tested in the labs around the world. And I'm happy to state that we did get certification from many, many different laboratories. And we could show that repeatedly, we would get a 643 reduction in these kinds of pathogens, just using nano silver. So this is what Tata Swatch looks like. It's a beautiful design. So we launched it in Dindigul. We did a very small pilot. We got the feedback from homemakers, and they were very pleased with the product. And many of them were not particularly literate, but then they were asked to use it. And the feedback that they gave to us was very, very interesting. The anecdotal evidence that came from them was they used this purifier, this water purifier, Tata Swatch, for about 2 to 3 months. And they actually came and told us that, look, one is, of course, the water looks very clean and all that is very good. But they said something which is quite striking. They said that the children in the family became sick less often and they attended school more regularly. That's a very interesting thing. At the end of the day, that's the impact that you want to see. So that's a feedback that came. And what is the knock-on effect of that? So remember, these are fairly poor households. So both the mother and father are both working. So if the child becomes sick and has to stay home, cannot go to school, then the mother has to stay at home, and that's a loss of income. So it's not just the amount of time that the child spends at school, it's also about the impact it has on other people in the household, right? So the mother can also spend more time at work and the income of the family actually goes up. So these are all things that we were very pleased to hear happen when we launched the product. Okay, I'm going to skip this. So the US EPA guidelines, we followed all the protocols and we got all the approvals across the globe. And in 2009, the product was launched by Mr. Tata. He doesn't come and launch many products for the Tata Group unless he actually passionately believes in it. So he came and launched this product at the NCPA. And you can see me on the stage here. I looked a lot different then. That's about 12, 13 years ago. But here I am. And this was a very, very proud moment for us because this product came right from ideation to the proof of concept, to the scale up, to the testing, to the final product launch, completely came out from my group. So yeah, it was a great moment for us. Okay, so costing, I didn't tell you anything about the costing, right? We said, okay, it's going to be safe, it's going to be affordable, et cetera, et cetera. But how did we do the costing? When we got into the project, we really had no clear idea as to what would be the appropriate cost. So we had to work backwards. So we made some assumptions, right? So let's say that you have a family of 5, 3 children and 2 adults in the family, mother and father and 3 children, a rural household, typical rural household today. And they would each one would drink about 2 liters of water a day. So you need about 10 liters of water is what they would consume for drinking water. So you need to provide 10 liters of water to them. And the cost that they can safely afford for that purification cost is, say, about 1 rupee. 1 rupee is what they can dedicate towards water purification. So 30 rupees a month is what a poor household can afford for water purification, right? So what that means is it works out to about 10 paise per liter of water is what the cost. We had to come up with a device that will be able to give you a water purification cost of 10 paise per liter. How do we do that? Nano silver is expensive. Silver is expensive, right? Silver is expensive. The plastic that we're using is expensive. Everything is expensive, but we actually did it. So if you ask me the amount of silver that we actually use in Tata Swatch, it's about 0.6 to 0.8 grams of silver. That's all it is. Because it's nanoscale, high surface area, we could reduce the amount of silver. So we did an analysis. We looked at the cost of the product, the lifetime of the product, the cost for replacing the cartridge every 6 months, for example, and we calculated what we call the amortized cost, right? We calculate how the cost works out over a period of, say, about 10 years, and we were able to beat this 10 paise per liter cost. And we were better than anything else in the market. HUL Purit, we had AquaSure, Kenstar, all of them gave water purification cost that was significantly higher than us, 2 times to 3 times our cost. So this is what the affordability approach actually meant. So once this happened, this was actually a watershed moment for all of us in the Innovation Center in Tata Chemicals, because this gave us a lot of confidence, saying that yes, we can actually come up with these kinds of products, which can be not only high tech, because nanotechnology is still high tech. There's no doubt about it, but it's possible to make high technology products available at a very significantly low cost for people who need it the most. It was an eye opener for us. So this learning that we had was, it kind of by osmosis went into all the other projects in the team in the Innovation Center. It went to the biology people, it went to the biotechnology guys, it went to the chemical engineers. It became a kind of a mantra and a philosophy in the team as to how we can actually reduce costs without sacrificing on quality. So this is what Tata Swatch could do. 1 rupee a day for a family of 5 is the water purification cost if you buy that product. That's not to say that these are the only technologies available. There are lots of very interesting technologies that are available globally. I just wanted to give you a few examples. One is the solar still, the Helio Domestico. You can look it up. It's a very simple technique where you use sunlight to, essentially, this is desalination of water. You just take saline water and you can distill the water and you can purify it. Very, very simple technology. I don't know whether it's scalable, but certainly it's a technology that's out there. There's another very interesting NGO. It's called Potters for Peace, and they provide you with technology. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to set up a water purification business, they will give you this technology for free. So they would sell you the technology for making these kinds of clay buckets in which they put nano silver inside, very similar to what we do. You fill it with water and the nano silver would purify the water and you can use it. So this is another technology that's out there. There are lots of very interesting bioresidues that happen in industry. Rice cash was a great example, right? So I forgot to tell you the full story of rice cash. So once we came up with the product, we had to get large amounts of rice cash. So we had to source rice cash from the rice mills. So we got in touch with the rice mills. They were very happy to give us the rice cash for free, because what they were doing is they were just dumping it in landfills. They had no use for the rice cash. So we went to them and said, look, we can use it for water purification. They said, take it. They gave it to us for free. We only had to pay for the transportation cost. But once they knew about Tata Swatch and it became successful, they then started charging us. But that's fair enough. If there's any value that's being generated, it has to be shared with everyone in the value chain. So we did start paying the rice cash people. But what I'm trying to say is these kinds of byproducts from industry, which are currently not being used, can become input materials for another industry. So if you take, for example, coconut shells, the kind of coconut shell carbon and charcoal that you get, that can go into water purifiers as well. So that becomes a philosophy. A waste product for one industry can become the input material for another industry. You can reduce your costs. That's many companies actually do it. So it also talks about sustainability. You start reusing and recycling material more efficiently. In India, we have a lot of traditional knowledge, lots of traditional knowledge. We use moringa seeds. It's been used in villages for water treatment, right? It's basically a flocculant. You put it in water, it flocculates, it takes out the impurities. They'll just aggregate and settle down. There's a lot of this kind of traditional knowledge that's available in India. What we need to do is to understand this traditional knowledge and try to bring modern science to upgrade the technology. That's pretty much what we did with rice cash. Rice cash is used in villages. They use it as a tooth powder. They use it for water filtration already. Can you bring modern science and upgrade those products, right? So that, like with nano silver, what we've done, we put nano silver into rice cash and it becomes something else altogether. It becomes a product that you can sell anywhere in the globe. So these kinds of things can be done. So traditional knowledge combined with modern science can give you a blockbuster product. So I'm going to stop here and then just talk recount some immortal words by Gandhiji, I think one of the things that we are going to be faced with increasingly is that we're going to be resource constrained. The world just does not have enough resources to feed our needs, and actually it's more of greed. So Gandhiji said our world has enough for each person's need, but not for his greed. So this whole sustainability mantra, cradle to cradle, cradle to grave, you hear all these kinds of things. You talk about circular economy. All of these things are becoming very, very important. We have to reuse, we have to recycle materials. For the first time in the history, it is now possible to take care of everybody at the highest standard of living. So it's also true that in the 21st century, we have phenomenally good technology. And that technology can be used to do wonderful things. It can also be used to reduce costs. So as Buckminster Fuller said, it's now possible to live a really good life, high quality life in a sustainable manner. I just want to leave you with a couple of cartoons. It's just nice to have a bit of a laugh before we all say goodbye. There's a challenge to being an innovator, and this is something that I was confronted with when I got into industry. It is not enough just that you know your science, right? You have to, of course, if you're a nanotechnologist, you need to know nanoscience and nanotechnology. There's no alternative to that. That's a given. But in the business world, to be an innovator, to be able to understand what kind of product needs to be made and how do you take it to market, you need other skills. So this is a very interesting cartoon. This gentleman goes for an interview, and the lady who's interviewing him says, your resume states that you worked with 2 presidents, you won the Nobel Prize, and you've also climbed Mount Everest. That's all fine and dandy, but how good are you at telemarketing? So while you should be a master in one subject, you should at least have passing familiarity with many, many different things. It could be telemarketing, it could be regulatory framework, it could be finance, it could be project management, it could be business management, whatever. These tools are also required to become a successful entrepreneur or innovator. Idea to market, there are many pitfalls. And I talked about one pitfall, right? One of the big mistakes that we made in Tata Swatch is using a non-food grade ingredient for capping. That was a big mistake that we made. So we lost a year in that process. So this is again a very funny cartoon which talks about the idea going to the market, right? So originally, what the market wants is an apple. That's what the company was asked to come up with. So you have the idea, and then you have capital constraints. In a very large corporation, somebody proposes an idea, proposes a project, and then a certain amount of money is allocated to that. There's a budget that's made available to it. The budget will never be what their scientific team wants. So there'll be some constraints, and that will eat into the idea. Then you come to the technical feasibility, right? There's certain things that you can and cannot do. Maybe competition is also doing it. Therefore, you'll have to skirt around what they're doing. Technical feasibility will eat into the idea. The legal guys will come and tell you, no, this patent, you're infringing this patent, you can't do this. All of this, and then management indecision. In very large companies, that's a big problem, right? So management, because they're dealing with multiple projects, multiple situations, scenarios, they take a long time to come up with a decision, and that also eats into the success of the product. So by the time you get to the product being made and made available to the market, it becomes applesauce, where what really was required is the apple. So the moral of this particular story is to say that whenever, at least this is what we do in the corporate world, when we get together a team to come up with an idea that will go to market, we get everybody we create what is called a cross-functional team. We create a team not just of the technology people, but we get the business guys in, we get the finance people in, we get the legal people in, all of them into the same room on day one, at the time of ideation, so that there are no nasty surprises when the idea goes through the whole value chain, right? So this is something that we also learned in the corporate world. Not particularly relevant in the academic world, but there are some lessons to be learned that can be used in, for example, a PhD program. Okay, I think I have exceeded my time. My apologies for that, but this is a topic that's really close to my heart, and I do tend to get carried away. But thank you so much for your attention. The journey of ideating, making a prototype, making a product, and finally something that will be a successful product in the market is a very enriching one. But it's also very, it's frustrating at times. So I didn't talk about the many frustrations that we went through. There were a lot of backs and forth. We had to backtrack. I talked about the non-food grade capping agent, but there were many, many more things that were very demoralizing, but we stayed the course. And at the end of the day, I think we came out a much stronger team, a much wiser team after this whole episode. Solving a problem that unfortunately today even still remains unresolved. If you look at India, we still don't have technologies that are in the hands of the people who need it the most, and it's a regulatory problem. The framework, the regulatory framework, which says this product can be sold and this cannot, requires a lot of rethinking, but that's another story altogether. With that, I'll stop. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Murali, for a wonderful presentation. And I hope everybody got some take home on various aspects from academic research to the product marketing. So the pitfalls in the journey. So there's time for some questions from the audience. Because here, most of us are academicians. So, and your advantage is that you are an academician as well as into the corporate world. So that's why it's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Dr. Shastri, just a question. Was the infringement based on the silver nanoparticles part of the work, or was it more on the ash?
No, it was not on the material in the water purifier. It was on the end of life device, that plunger that I talked about, the inorganic salt. That was where the infringement was. That was where they claimed. I don't have time, but how we invalidated the claim made by the other company is a really interesting story. We actually showed that the patent that they were claiming was infringing, that we were infringing. We went to the court and we showed that itself was null and void. So then it became the judge just threw it out and said nothing doing. I mean, your patent itself is not valid anymore, and therefore they can use it. And we didn't actually use it. We used something very, very different. But regardless, their patent was actually thrown out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. This is Tirumaleshwar from Mangalore University. Actually, what about these pesticides from the rice husk ash? Is it effective to the health, or when we do the ash, it will burn away, or what happens, sir?
Yeah, the pesticides will definitely burn away. So the pesticides won't remain once you do the combustion of the rice husk ash. That's not a problem. But the question still remains: if you have pesticides in water, which you're treating through Tata Swachh, is Tata Swachh capable of removing the pesticides? The answer is no. We are not able to deal with pesticides, and therefore, I mean, this was the first product that came out. Tata Chemicals was looking at other variants of Tata Swachh which will deal with pesticides, which will deal with arsenic and so on. But the way the product that I described will not remove pesticides from water.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Professor Vishalakshi from Chemistry Department, sir. It was a very informative lecture. I would just like to know the role of silver nanoparticles were just to destroy the pathogens, or does it have any other function of removal of adsorbates, colored
No.
matter?
That's a good question. No, so the primary role of nanosilver was to basically kill the pathogens, right? Now the mechanism, I didn't talk about the mechanism, but it does that through the. So what happens is when silver nanoparticles make contact with water, they release silver ions into solution very slowly. So there's a slow process of dissolution of silver as silver ions into solution. Ag+, the silver ions are what are toxic to the microorganisms. So the silver can go and bind to the proteins in the microorganisms. Basically, disulfide linkages in the protein can be cleaved. Silver can form a bond with sulfur, and it therefore cleaves the disulfide linkages and denatures the protein. That's one thing that happens. Silver can also bind to certain nucleobases in the DNA and prevent the replication of the bacteria. So that's a very well-known mode of action. But the role of nanosilver was primarily to deal with the pathogens in the water, not to scavenge anything else.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I would like to ask one more question, if I'm allowed to ask. Sir, about this inorganic salt, which is sparingly soluble, which you have used as a part of the plunger, you have a wide range of solids which can be used for the purpose, or?
Yeah, you can. In principle, I mean, there's a large spectrum of inorganic salts which are sparingly soluble. So we use one which is, so, okay, let me tell you what additional things that you can do. You're right. I mean, there are a whole range of inorganic salts that you can use for the end-of-life device. But one of the things that we were trying to do, and we were not successful, is to use the salt that was dissolving in water to actually improve the nutritive value of the water, right? So can you, for example, slowly dissolve maybe calcium ions or whatever, something, magnesium ions or zinc ions into the water? So you can improve the quality of water, not only at removing the pathogens and purifying water, but you can kind of incorporate ions, metal ions or stuff, or even you can also have nutrition ingredients like oligosaccharides in it that can improve the quality of water, improve the nutritive value of water. We tried a few experiments, but by the time I left Tata Chemicals, I don't know what happened afterwards. But there are a large number of opportunities to play with, not just in the composition of the salt, but in incorporating other entities with the salt that can dissolve into the water, that can beneficiate the water in some sense.
Yeah, a lot of scope we have.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hello, sir. Balakrishna.
Yeah.
Retired professor of physics from Mangalore University. I have a small question.
Yeah.
What happens to these killed pathogens?
Well, they come out with the water, right?
With the water.
But they are inactive, so there's no problem in consuming that because they're dead. They're not capable of causing any diseases, but they do exist in the water that comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So that might seem a little yucky, but it happens, right? But there's nothing to fear because they're inactivated completely.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were, there's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs. So, you have the cartridge, right? So the cartridge works for about 6 months and then the consumer throws it away. I've been telling a lot of people wherever I've been giving this talk to say that there's an opportunity for an entrepreneur to recycle the cartridge, because at the end of the life cycle of that cartridge, there is still about 0.4 to 0.3 grams of silver inside the cartridge. Plus, there's really high quality plastic that can be recycled. So that can actually become a business proposition. Somebody can collect it at scale. You can recycle the whole thing and make some good amount of money. It would be a good project.
Dr. Rizwana, you wanted to ask something?
I think for some of them, the internet connection is not very stable.
Okay, there are no more questions. We'll go to the last part of the program. Dr. Monica Sadananda will propose the vote of thanks formal. Professor Monica.
Thank you, Professor Pattabi. On behalf of the IQAC, that is the Internal Quality Assurance Cell, the Faculty of Science and Technology, Mangalore University, It is indeed an honor to propose the vote of thanks on this occasion of National Science Day 2022, especially on this occasion of the National Science Day lecture. It was indeed a pleasure, Dr. Murali Shastri, to listen to you as you explained how you went from idea to the production and then to the market. It was really an eye-opener for many of us to understand how these processes occur. So thank you very much for that. It was a highly scientific, very well explained lecture. Thank you very much. Especially we would like to mention and appreciate that you took time off your busy schedule to be with us here today for this 1.5 hours away from your bench. We know it means a lot to you, the time that you have taken today. So we really appreciate you being here with us today and for delivering this very important talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I must tell you that I'm not away from the bench. It's now 9 p.m. in Australia. So the time difference worked out really well for me. So at the end of the day's work, I could do this talk. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity once again. Patabi, once again, thanks a lot. And yeah, look forward to engaging with you as the future unfolds.
We would also like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor for the inaugural remarks that he gave on the National Science Day. We would like to thank the Registrar, Dr. Kishore Kumar CK, for facilitating this event. Most importantly, we would like to thank Professor Manjunatha Pattabi, Dean, Faculty Science and Technology, Director of the IQAC, as well as Chairman of the Department of Materials Science, Mangalore University, for organizing this event. Thanks to all the participants, especially our respected colleagues from the Faculty of Science and Technology, research scholars and students for joining in this event. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, one and all. I also thank our IT people who have helped us to this WebEx meeting.
Yeah.
So thanks, one and all. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Close ಮಾಡೋದಲ್ಲ? Close ಅಲ್ಲ? Okay. Yeah.